I rise today on behalf of the hardworking people, families, farmers, and forgotten rural communities of Bow River in southern Alberta to speak against a budget that will make life more expensive for every single Canadian. This government has delivered a spending plan that drives up the cost of food, drives up the cost of housing, drives up the cost of energy, and digs this country deeper and deeper into debt than at any time in our history. And for what? For more bureaucracy, more waste, more costly programs that fail the people they claim to help, and yet another round of broken promises from the Prime Minister and his Finance Minister. Let's start with the basics. The Finance Minister promised Canadians a $62 billion deficit, but instead the deficit is now 78. You know, I remember a time when a $3, $4, $5 billion deficit was dramatic and worthy of bringing the government down, and now it's almost as if money means nothing anymore. He promised to lower the debt-to-GDP ratio. He promised to rein in government spending, and instead he's spending $90 billion more, an equivalent to $5,400 in new inflationary spending for every household in the country. He promised to work with municipalities to cut home building taxes in half and to get more homes built. But this budget breaks that promise too, making housing more expensive and more unattainable for young Canadians. He promised stronger investment, yet the budget reveals business investment is collapsing. These are not small misunderstandings. These are broken commitments that have real consequences for real families. Now, on the subject of consequences, economic consequences, nothing is more destructive to jobs and investment than this government's looming oil and gas emissions cap. Further illustrating the disconnect between the government's projections and reality, ECCC's own modeling assumed that the cap would reduce production by only 0.7%. How do we become a global energy superpower by reducing production by 0.7%? That's the first fallacy. But as Dr. Heather Exner-Perot confirmed before the Environment Committee, this modeling was already flawed. It relied on overly optimistic scenarios from the Canadian Energy Regulator and the International Energy Agency, which have not actually matched actual market trends. And in reality, the independent estimates from the Conference Board of Canada and Deloitte suggest the production could fall by as much as 11%. Figure that aligns much more closely with observed trends. And even the PBO, the Parliamentary Budget Officer's 5.4% projection, appears conservative in light of the current data. The Parliamentary Budget Officer also reported that the emissions cap would cost over 40,000 jobs and shrink nominal GDP by $20.5 billion US dollars by 2032. This is a stark discrepancy, and it indicates the government is downplaying the true economic impact of its own policy. It's putting Canadian energy investment at risk, it's putting jobs at risk, and as Dr. Exner-Perot warned, the cap acts as a production cap in disguise. It's going to drive capital out of the country, it's driving capital out of the country, and sending good-paying Canadian jobs to jurisdictions with weaker environmental standards, and this budget hints at delays and softens the language, but it does not go nearly far enough. If Canadians want to be an energy superpower, if we want to attract the capital, if we want to attract capital instead of driving it away, the emissions cap must be taken off the table. Only then can we restore investor confidence, protect thousands of jobs, and unleash the full potential of Canadian energy. One of the most shocking features, Mr. Speaker, under this Prime Minister's budget is that the interest on the national debt will reach $55.6 billion next year. Just the interest on the national debt is $55.6 billion. That's a hard number to sink in. This means that we are spending more just to service the debt than we spend on the entire Canadian health transfer. More than the entire GST revenue. The equivalent is every single dollar collected through GST now goes straight to a banker or a bondholder rather than a doctor, a nurse, or patient care. That's the true cost of this government's reckless spending. Einstein once talked about the magic of compound interest, but this government is showing us the magic of compound spending. Under the Prime Minister, the federal debt has soared to $1.35 trillion. Trillion with a T. And this budget adds another $321+ billion over the next 5 years, and more than double what the previous government would have added over the same period. Canadians are paying for runaway debt. Taking $5 out of a taxpayer's pocket and giving $2 back as a handout is a broken proposition, and it devalues the contract a government has with the people. Mr. Speaker, this budget also fails Canadian farmers and rural communities. Major farm organizations have been clear in their criticism. The Canadian Federation of Agriculture stated that while the government included some measures, the budget is a missed opportunity to address some of our sector's most pressing challenges, such as permanently increasing the interest-free threshold for the advance payments program, dealing with labor disruptions in the food supply chain, and protecting farmland. Modernizing the Canadian Grain Act should also be a priority. Grain Growers of Canada warned that without extended interswitching, farmers lose a competitive tool that keeps costs in check and performance accountable in terms of grain and commodity transport. The Fruit and Vegetable Growers of Canada called the budget a failure on food security, and stating bluntly that this budget fails to deliver on the government's earlier promises. This budget falls short on all accounts. Moreover, the CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, modernization measures do not go far enough. For too long, the agency has shifted responsibility between itself, Health Canada, and Agriculture Canada, depending on where the pressure was coming from to perform, and left farmers without accountability or timely action. Without structural reform, the CFIA will continue to hide behind bureaucracy rather than provide the certainty and transparency the farmers need to operate efficiently and safely. Canadian farmers and the ag industry and the public demand it. The incremental digital upgrades planned cannot fix this systemic issue. The government's approach leaves Canadian farmers exposed to higher costs, excessive regulation, and competitive disadvantage. Until the industrial carbon tax is removed, bureaucratic barriers are reduced, and the CFIA is truly reformed to act decisively on agriculture issues, this budget will continue to fail rural Canadians. Now, Mr. Speaker, nowhere is the impact of this budget more painfully felt than at the grocery store. Canadians are already facing one of the worst affordability crises in living memory, and this budget only makes it worse. Food inflation came in 70% higher than the Bank of Canada's target. Families are spending $800 more this year than they did last just to feed themselves. And the basic necessities, meat, coffee, baby formula, they're all skyrocketing. Beef is up 12% plus, processed meat up 5 plus, coffee up 27 plus, infant formula up 6.6, soup 5.3. These aren't luxuries, these are staples. And when the cost of basic staples goes up, everything else in life becomes harder for working families. And while this government finds new ways to tax food at the checkout counter, it continues taxing food at the farm gate as well. Rural communities know the reality. The government's refusal to scrap and its doubling down on the industrial carbon tax on fertilizer, farm equipment in this budget is breaking Canadian farmers. Farmers in my riding and across Canada have pleaded with the government to end the carbon tax on growing food. But instead, this budget doubles down. It keeps the carbon tax on barns, on irrigation, on grain drying, on fertilizer production, on tractors and combines, and when you tax the people who grow the food, you invariably raise the cost of the food they produce. The consequences are real. These increases hurt rural Canadians, seniors on fixed incomes, single parents, and young families trying to get ahead. It's the result of high taxes, high deficits, and a high regulation from a government that refuses to listen. Mr. Speaker, Conservatives believe in a simple principle. If you want to make life affordable, you cut taxes. You cut waste, you build homes, you unleash industry, and you remove the bureaucratic barriers that hold Canadians back. Instead, the Prime Minister and his Finance Minister are choosing the opposite path. They're choosing bigger government, higher taxes, more regulation, higher deficits, and more debt, and Canadians are paying the price. Mr. Speaker, Canadians deserve a government focused on lowering costs, not raising them. They deserve a government that believes in farmers, families, and workers, not big bureaucracies and high taxes. They deserve a government that respects the value of a dollar and dignity to work, and Conservatives are ready to deliver. Thank you.